welcome to the Tea and a Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And on today's episode, we're talking about small town UK versus small town USA and the differences between them.
I'm excited to do this.
And the similarities, I suppose, too.
I'm excited to do this topic because I don't know that this is anything we've ever talked about somehow.
It's not really. I guess we haven't really talked about them.
No? And I'm originally from a small town. I mean, I guess it all depends on what you classify as a small town, but...
I mean,
would say...
it's somewhere that's got a population less than 25,000 and greater than 2,000, I think.
Okay. What would a town with less than 2,000 be, though, then?
A village or a hamlet, I guess.
I don't think we use those
small
words.
Village. Small
no, we
village.
do use village sometimes, I guess, but
yeah.
Hamlet, no. I don't think. Maybe in New England somewhere they use that term.
Hamlet.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a little, where 500 people or so live.
We would just say less than 2,000, the middle of nowhere.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in especially Middle America,
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of that kind of...
I mean, you've been through many places like that.
Yes, and it's like, these are like abandoned towns. Does anyone actually live here?
And they do, because all you have to do is look at the population on the sign when you enter the town. It'll be like 500 and something.
Yes,
that's the population.
Yeah, it's strange.
How does it even function, I wonder? With that few people, it's like...
It must be close enough to a bigger city, because I mean, you some people call because when I was doing research on this and the similarities, it was like on Quora.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, what's the definition for that? Are you saying just like a small town on its own, or one of these in America now, or one of those like communities that kind of like are attached to a bigger city, like up here in Austin, like Cedar Park and Austin and all that?
You can't. No, those are suburbs.
Those are like suburbs, yeah. But people might say, oh, yeah, they're small towns, like Georgetown. It's my small town,
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's part of Austin, really, isn't it?
Georgetown, specifically Georgetown.
Or Round Rock.
Used to seem a little ways away from Austin, but Austin is built out toward it. Yeah, where you don't even really notice that you've left Austin. So now I guess you would consider Georgetown as part of Austin, the greater Austin metropolitan area.
Yeah.
That's what they say with these big cities. But I don't know. I mean, if you are from a city of, I don't know, 4 million people, then I'd say even a town of 100,000 might be considered a small town to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Do you consider that a small city? 100,000? I mean, it's not like a city.
No, it's not.
I think when I moved to Austin, it was like 500,000. Was the population, and it felt like a little city,
It's exploded since then. It's about 7 billion now, isn't it?
It feels like it when you're in certain times in traffic, but but it felt bigger than where I came from. Yeah, but it didn't feel like LA or New York or anything by any means. Yeah. Not even Dallas, It felt like a small city.
New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same kind of thing, but that's one of the things, and a lot of people were like, oh, well, in Britain, a small town is usually going to be within easy, because of the surface area of the UK, it's like, most of the small towns will be within easy driving or transport distance of a major town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it'll be like half an hour away or something like that,
So like the town that I was born in and grew up till, age 10, 11, 12, whatever. It was like population 14,000, I think. But we're talking in the Texas Panhandle, so the surface area, like you say, was a bit more spread out. I mean, it still only took like less than 10 minutes to get from very, very edge of one side of the town to the other,
yeah.
And I'm talking usually closer to 5 minutes drive. But I think that it was about the same surface area as the town you were from in Wales.
Well, yeah.
But you guys had a lot more people packed in.
A lot more. It was a lot more people packed into these. Like,
and I mean,
that's why you
time,
go, like, they go to these small villages in Gloucestershire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's only, like, I'd say 1,000 people at most living in them, you'd think, you know? And it's like, yeah, maybe there is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like all these, like, it's like the surface area.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, there's a village of this village here, and village B is like only like 2 miles away down the road, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, are they the same village? But no, I live in this village.
Oh, right.
And they live in that village, and
Because I think I looked your town up, and its population was like 40-something thousand?
40,000, something like that. Yeah, it's growing.
It was quite a lot more than the town I was from, but it still definitely felt like a small town.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things. The focal point of it is like an Anglican parish church, usually. In most small towns, the focal point will be an Anglican parish church, which, you know, that doesn't usually have much of a congregation.
Yeah.
Anymore, because smartphones are now the new religion, you know?
I was not sure where you were going with that because of smartphone. You know, they go to church on their smartphones. I thought you were going to say.
They do. They're, you know, it's just like that. That's their new religion now.
They just log in, like, you know, doing TikTok church or something. It's just like 15 seconds. Okay, I'm good for the day.
Logged in. I'm in. You know, it's my smartphone's a new religion. God. But no, that's mainly what it is. It's like, you know, you went to the one in my town.
Yeah. I was dying to... You guys, in the town he's from,
it's from Wales, like the 11th century or something.
It looks like a medieval. I can't remember when it's from, but it looks very like medieval on the outside. So I was dying to see the inside of it, but
it was always locked up.
Yeah, and churches over here, like old churches, you can usually just walk in and go see, or actually most places in Britain and Europe, in the bigger cities anyway, you can just go in as long as they're not holding service at that time. You can, or having a wedding or something like that. You can just go in and have a look around and whatever, you know. But this church was always locked up.
It's locked up, and I knew why too.
So I think we did go like on a Sunday morning, didn't we?
I don't know if it was a Sunday morning, but we were down there early.
And we caught them as it was ending, and they were all coming out.
And she was about to close the door. Can I go in and look?
I say they were all coming out. There was like
10 people.
10 people max.
Yeah. That's the small congregation.
Yeah.
There, you know, yeah.
Whereas, you know, when I'd been to church in a small town in Texas, small town Texas church, when I was growing up anyway, it is quite different now to when I was a kid, actually.
It's like 50 million people.
It was full.
50 million people.
It was full. It's not as full now. You know, I used to, one of my grandmothers went to the Baptist church in the town that we lived in, and it was always packed on a Sunday. It was packed. Yeah. You had to save seats if you wanted to sit together, like, oh no, you know, these seats are saved and stuff, because it was full. But, you know, I did go there, recently-ish, I say that, within the last 10 years or more, and it was nowhere near what it was when I was little.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is, I think, church numbers. I don't know what word.
The congregation numbers.
They're dwindling.
Oh yeah. I mean,
even here in Texas, you know.
Yeah, I guess so. But in Britain, they've been on the dwindle since the 60s.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd say by the 90s it was at an all-time low, and it's just kept on getting lower, you know, because no one goes to church, no one's particular, and if you're religious, then you just keep it to yourself in your house, I guess. You don't actually go out.
But so you're telling me, like, according to what you read, that church that you and I went to in your town, that was like the main church? Because there was a bunch of churches in your town, and there were in mine as well.
But it'll be like an Anglican parish church, you know, like that's like a huge building. You know, that'll be the focal point, because
Yeah.
You know, back then it was the church that ruled everything.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, the church had the money, and they were going to, you know, and this new town has people to get money from, so let's put a church here, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, they'll, you know, and they never got knocked down. I don't know why, because, I mean, a lot of churches do get knocked down, you know, the old ones.
Yeah.
Because no one's using
them.
I
say yeah, but is that true? I mean, I see a lot of old churches in Britain.
I remember, like, in maybe the 60s, funnily enough, they were knocking them down a lot.
You remember that, do you?
I remember that, yeah. I was there when they were knocking down old churches and stuff, you know. No, I mean, they did that kind of, I don't know, in Britain in the 60s, it kind of, like, whereas, like, it was kind of like the time.
It was the Beatles' fault.
It was the Beatles' fault, yes. It was all the Beatles' fault. This kind of time, but, you know, they were doing that kind of, that stuff where, like, people were coming in and the government ministers were like, okay, we've got to cut everything back.
Yeah.
And I guess the church was doing that too. We've got to buy all this stuff up. We've got to make, you know, because Britain had no money. It had debts to pay and whatever after the war, and it was still paying them off.
Yeah.
So they were just like, oh, we need more commercial space to people to rent and, you know, pay us some money here, you know. So churches, it's like the church isn't giving us any money.
Yeah.
You know, so knock a few of them down.
I mean, I don't know about knocking down old churches in America. I don't know. You know?
I mean, you've got, like, they're more like stadiums here now, aren't they?
You're talking about, like, the televangelist churches.
Well, no.
What do they call them?
The one up the road is like a
mega churches.
It's not a stadium, but it's like a convention center size. It's like a big warehouse looking thing.
It just looks like a big square building.
Big square building with a roof on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I suppose,
like a big gymnasium.
Like a big gymnasium.
Like that,
yeah, you can go there. You can
work on your abs.
Work on your abs and pray. Pray for those abs.
But I don't know. I've seen on something years ago that I guess, because obviously maybe sometimes the churches, this has become a church episode.
Well, yeah, that was the first little point I had on my UK.
Sometimes the churches do become, like, disused because they've gotten enough money to move to a different building or whatever. And I've seen people, like, especially in some of the bigger cities, this is turning them into houses. You know, like converting them into, like, a cool old house or a restaurant.
I mean, people can buy up a church and, like, convert it into a restaurant.
You can go then to pray to the church of McDonald's.
McDonald's would love to be installed in a building like that, I'm sure. You know, like the Gothic architecture and all that, you know.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's the same is true in small town America. You're going to find a lot of churches. I think depending on where you are, like in Texas, the town center is not so...
It's Main Street.
Yeah, it's not so built around the church as it was just built around, like, a downtown area.
Yeah.
You know,
an intersection.
Yeah, where all the businesses were, and then you had the houses on the outside of that, but you had all the businesses sort of, like, on a main street.
Yes.
That way, you know, you could go and get all your errands done, you know, and then go back out to your house on the edge of town or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But I think like, I always refer to New England in these because
podcasts. it's where it was the majority of the 13 colonies were.
Yeah, it's an older area. It's a closer together. There's more
New England.
It's more compact, you know. Yeah. In the New Englandish area on the East Coast, I think in small towns over there, they might have more of a church as the center of town type of situation.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of small towns, actually, like the courthouse or town hall was the center of town, like historically. You know, you would have a big, like, town hall building.
Place, yeah.
Yeah. And then Main Street, and then the houses were around the edges of town, you know, the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, yeah, because that makes sense, because we've got, like, in the town I lived in, there was a town hall, and it used to be like, oh, that building, that looks really old and stuff, and I think it was probably built in, like,
It was near the church, wasn't it?
This was near the church, yeah. It was near to the church, so it was like the council building or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, they'll obviously, like, UK towns will have variations in character, but it'll be like houses built closer together. Like, that's the main difference, I think, is because everything's so spread, especially in the Texas Panhandle. It was like there's so much space, so we'll build so much, you know, not separate, you know, enough that people can get on with their lives without having to see anybody. And they have to drive to, you know, into town instead of walk.
Yeah. Again, guys, for any new listeners that we have, anytime we're talking about these sort of British versus American type topics, we're talking from a Texas point of view because that's where we are. Yeah,
we're in Texas right now. So yeah, if you live up in New England and think, yeah, everything's close together, up here, I can walk into my town center. It's like, that's not the case.
Or on the West Coast, or even in the...
Well, maybe, yeah.
Or even in the...
Pacific Northwest or whatever, yeah maybe, yeah.
It's just...
You might live in a little village.
Might be a completely different situation to what we're talking about. In Texas, we've got a lot of land, so, you know, it's going to be probably a bit different than other areas of the United States. But we're talking
There's a lot of Texas space in Texas.
Specifically.
And a lot of it is unused.
Yeah.
It looks like, yeah.
But I think in Texas, the reason why places were not built... houses were not built so close together. And I say that, but even in the small town that I'm from, in the downtown area, the plots of land where the old houses are or were, because a lot of them have been torn down, I think I've taken you around there. They're closer together. They're not like in Britain where they're either attached or like very, very close together, but they're much closer together than the newer areas of town, which are on, you know, quite bigger plots of land with big front yards and backyards and everything.
The funny thing, you know, because I mean, you've got to remember that Britain was like modernized quite early on in, you know, and they modernized it, but they didn't really, you know, they didn't really widen the streets, so everything is narrow. And it was for the pedestrian. It was built in the times of the pedestrian and the odd horse and cart, which, you know, everything was narrower. But, you know, like you see these old like movies of London and London in 1920 compared to London today, and you think, oh, it kind of looked maybe a little bit bigger, you know, like the roads looked a lot wider
in the 20s?
In the 20s or something like that, or something like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, and it looks narrower today.
It might have been the perspective of the camera, though.
Maybe, yeah, but sometimes it looks like, but it's because of the amount of, like, there was not really many cars on the road at that time, you know, and it was just like people with their horse and carts and walking around, and so it looked like massive, you know, so they didn't need to put a median in the lane or traffic lights or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So it was just like, there was just all this space and it looks huge, you know?
Yeah.
But now, you know, it's kind of like Britain's gotten narrower because of all the cars. You know, you need pavement for people to walk on who still walk and use public transport. Yeah. But you also need space for cars now, you know, to park and drive around. Whereas over here, that was never an issue. It's like pedestrians still aren't a thing, you know? Yeah. It's like, oh, if you want to walk around, then we've got this area over here for you where you can park, and then you can walk around there.
It's a park and it's got sidewalks.
It's a park and it's got sidewalks through it, you know, no cars, that's fine, you know.
The town that I'm from in the Texas Panhandle was not even a town until the very early 20s.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was one of those boom towns.
It was a boom town, yeah. And so the houses built around the downtown area were built for cars because people had cars by the 20s.
Yeah.
The 20s were, the cars in the 20s were smaller.
Small, obviously.
So the streets, the older streets, you know, were still more narrow.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the cars were smaller. But yeah, most houses had probably not a garage at that time still, but they had a driveway. They still had a driveway even at that time, you know, because people had cars and they needed somewhere to park their cars.
I mean, it's amazing to me when I think of, like, you know, like small towns, and they they decide, oh yeah, we're just going to buy up this plot of land and make an estate on it. Mm-hmm. And it's like American-style homes with drives and, and all that kind of stuff, and like a little gated community or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did they fit that in there? They must have knocked something down, but it appears they haven't.
Yeah.
And another thing about small towns in Britain is like, you won't really see too many fast food chains. Yeah. And I'm not talking about where I'm from.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you go to like a village or something like that, it's like you're not going to see a McDonald's, you're not going to see a KFC, even on the outskirts of it.
Yeah.
What you're going to see in the main town centre is like independently run kebab shops and, fish and chip shops and stuff like that, Mm-hmm. You won't see too many chains because they'll be like, no, you can't come in here. They'll band together and they'll be like, you get out of here because, you're just going to
You think that is the reason?
That's probably the reason, It's like...
just few enough residents that they're just like, no, we don't want it?
Because they do it with Tesco. Even.
Oh, really?
If Tesco wants to build on the edge, say like, for instance, like, I don't know, small village...
In Scotland.
Well, yeah, no, it happened, actually, and the residents... And sometimes the residents are like, yes, we need a Tesco. Yes, we need an Asda. I'm sick of travelling an hour on the bloody train to go to Tesco. Mm-hmm. It's like, and the local shop doesn't have it, Yeah. And it's like, well, I want to go to Tesco. I want to go to Asda. I want to go to Morrison's, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they'll build. But, when I lived in Ullapool, it was a village. It was a fishing village. It was tiny. It was even tinier than where I lived in Wales, Yeah. Or anywhere else. So it was like village life, and it was just like...
They just got a Tesco's like fairly recently,
right? Recently, and I was there like 25 years ago or something.
Within the last 5 years or so.
So, yeah.
That's funny, though, because, small town USA, I would say most towns have a Walmart. Yeah. Most towns have a McDonald's.
Yeah.
And where I'm from, even though it's just a population of 14,000, which I realize there's a lot more towns in America with a lot smaller populations. Like, to me, that's very small, but I know there's much smaller places. But they had, they have the McDonald's, they have a Sonic, they've got, basically all the chain.
That's what you said, when you came to... I don't know, they've got a Sonic, they've got KFC, they've got Subway. Yeah. It's like, I'm very disappointed by that. So I was like, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, but in the town, this isn't the town centre. If you go into the town centre, it's everything's kind of boarded up.
Yeah.
And I mean, that might be the same thing when they get a Walmart in wherever you lived, So wherever you live in a small town in Texas, they might get a Walmart thing and it'll just suck all the trade out of the town centre. Yeah, and they did. That's why they don't want Tesco coming, because it's going to suck all the trade out of the small businesses,
I think it's become more popular over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years to sort of try and revive small town Main Street. Let's get some businesses back in there. But
they tried to do it in where I was from too.
When I was a kid and growing up, it was really depressing to go downtown because
everything's boarded up.
You could tell that it was like a downtown area. Like all the buildings are attached to each other.
Yeah.
There's plenty of sidewalks, which there's not necessarily in the neighborhoods and the more outskirts parts of town. You can just tell there's like a downtowny vibe, but everything was boarded up,
no
there
businesses.
Was like a restaurant, and there was like
it's like 50 years ago this would have been banging.
Yeah,
this would have been going. But now,
and when we drive through all the small
since the
towns
80s
up to the Panhandle, it's the same kind of way.
Well, I go through those towns and I'm like, surely nobody lives here, and you're like, yeah, they do. Like Headley, Texas.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, nobody lives here, surely. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's no one here. It's like, I can see a house there, but it's like, there's like a vat of,
we're on like the highway, water, which doesn't necessarily take you right through the center of town.
It's a bypass, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it takes you just through the edge of town or whatever, so it makes it look more dead. than it would if you were in downtown, but not
that's the like, thing. That's the thing about Britain is like there's A roads and stuff, and until like the 1960s or 70s, that was the only way you could get anywhere.
Yeah, and A roads are
the original roads the Romans built.
Yeah, but they're like, what are they comparable to over here?
Oh, yeah. What do you call them?
I mean, they're not like highways,
they're not interstates.
Are they?
No, they're not interstates.
They're more like a farm to market type
farm
of
to
road?
Market road. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, they're more windy. There's no like shoulders.
No shoulders. Yeah. I mean all that kind of stuff. The A roads are like the old Roman roads, and of course they've been tarmacked, and everything. They're not exactly as they were in Roman times.
Yeah,
but they were what the Romans mapped out, between villages and everything like that. But now since the 60s. Motorways are the big thing. It's just like that. There's a bypass.
Yeah.
Ever since they built the bypass, no one comes here anymore.
Yeah.
They've forgotten about us.
Yeah.
So everything dried up. Everything's gone,
Yeah.
We're just the last ones here.
Yeah. We should have gotten a sponsorship for this episode with the show This Country and the new show that they're making on Fox.
We should have looked into that.
We should have tied that in, shouldn't we?
Because I mean,
because that's basically what we're talking about, isn't it? That show was about a small town.
This Country. It was in the countryside. Yeah, it was in the Cotswolds.
What is the American version going to be called? I can't remember.
Oh,
it's going to be called The Name of the Town, I think.
Yeah.
It's called Welcome to Flatch. Yeah. So, I don't know if
Welcome to Flatch.
I don't know if you guys have seen This Country. It's a BBC sitcom.
It's a BBC sitcom.
Mockumentary,
which were popularized by The Office and Alan Partridge and all that, And it's a BBC 3 one, and all the quality is there, BBC 2 and BBC 3, it's like all the quality is there,
Yeah.
And I'd seen clips of it on like Instagram and stuff, and I thought, oh, this is quite a funny show. I should check it out sometime, and never did until our VPN. I was looking at what to watch one night, and I was like, oh yeah, This Country. They've got all the series on there, so we watched it. The guy who plays the vicar is also in this new show, Chad.
Yeah, that comes on TBS.
Yeah, if you've seen that, he plays the uncle in that, but he's playing the vicar in this show.
And it's set in a village.
It's set in a village in the Cotswolds. Yeah, I can't remember what the village is called,
no.
And it's basically a brother and sister team wrote it, and they're playing cousins in the show.
Yeah,
and it's just so like British life. It's like, but it's funny because they've transplanted it to a small village. It's like something that a smaller town would have. Like where I lived, there would be youths around. But in this like small Cotswold village, which looks kind of idyllic, you wouldn't have young people there.
Not
They'd
like
be gone.
Them.
Not like them at all.
I mean, I think that's part of the joke.
That's part of the joke.
Because the Cotswolds is quite an expensive area to live in.
And they're not like they're not like terrible antisocial youths or anything like that.
No, they're just sad. They're sad.
They're just sad, and they keep doing stuff, and they're just hanging out together, and but they're acting like people in a bigger town would, like they'd be like
they think they're hard and stuff.
Yeah, and the vicar is like they're the one who's guiding them, and so it's like what you said about going to the church and stuff like that. In Wales, it's just kind of like, oh, we've got social problems, so that's why we lock up the church. And people come in here, they'll be drunk and whatever,
Yeah. But anyway, they've done a remake of it called Welcome to Flatch. Is that what
Welcome to Flatch? Sean William Scott from American Pie, and he's gonna play the vicar in it, or the what do you call it, the pastor, or the the priest or whatever. Yeah.
And it's gonna be set over here in a small town in America. I don't know where.
Middle
in America
somewhere. I think it's somewhere in Illinois. Actually,
it's gonna be interesting to see if it works, because I don't know. I mean, there's like we're talking in this episode. There are similarities between the types of people you find in small town in Britain and in America.
Yeah.
And there's similarities in the way of life in general. But there's also a lot of differences, I think. Just in general.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, we'll have to see if it works or not.
Yeah.
But it should, because because we do have small towns.
But America being a vast place,
mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'll be that funny to people
all over the country. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In Britain, I can imagine people in like Scotland going, "Oh God, yeah, this is what it's like up here, just with a different accent."
Yeah, because you and I talked about that, didn't we? Because the thing is small town Texas is not the same as small town Maryland.
Or small town Illinois or whatever. Yeah. Or small town California.
Or small town Utah.
Yeah.
It's like it's just not going to be the same. It's just not, you know. It will be in some ways, but... I don't know. Let us know if you guys watch that show and if you've seen the previews over here in America and what you think. Do you think it's just going to be a train wreck, or do you think it's going to be good,
I mean, this country is stunningly shot, I think, and it's just so funny on, the way the characters are written and everything. So I have high hopes for Welcome to Flatch, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
I noticed one of your last points on the British small town is that there's going to be quite likely to be a railway station.
Railway station, yeah.
Whereas,
nope.
No.
Nope. The railway expansion didn't quite happen.
There's probably a bus station.
Oh, yeah.
In a small town in America. There will be
There's a bus station and a railway station in small town Britain.
There's going to be There's going to be railroad tracks,
but it'll be freight trains and stuff like that. No passengers. Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while we saw a passenger train come through, but no, definitely more of just like the box cars with, carrying stuff, whatever it was. And it was just like, and even then you didn't get a ton of trains. Like there wasn't a train coming through even every hour, just a few a day. That's
kind of like, because in the Britain...
You could go play on the railroad tracks and be fine, like you weren't going to get hit by a train.
If I was living in like 1950s Britain, there would have been trains everywhere.
Yeah.
And you think it's like, Britain's trains everywhere now,
Yeah.
It's like there was far more trains in Britain. There was far more branch lines. There was far more everything until Dr. Beeching... axed them all and decided, we just need a few train lines, to the main hubs, and that's it. We need to axe all this, and whatever. So with all the branch lines and stuff, if you're out in the village or something, and you think, this is a nice little cycling route or whatever. Probably used to be a train track, and they just took it up and they just made it a cycling route or a walking route. Yeah. And it'll go to another village and it'll go here. And it used to be, it's like, because I think that around my area in Wales, there was several of those, like there was the coastal path, and I think there was one that went up into the rural area, and I was like, this has got to have been a train station, a train track at some point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting,
Really quickly before we're already a bit over time, but
we're over time.
What, is there to do for families or for kids or whatever in small town Britain?
There'll be a cinema.
There'll
be a cinema. There might be a bowling alley.
We had a 2-screen movie theater. two screens. That's it.
In my one, there was like this old Art Deco place. I think I took you to it. It might have been closed by then. I don't know. But then, of course, they pumped a load of money from Europe into it.
Yeah.
And decided to make this Eastgate complex place, which had an Odeon and Nando's and more Greg's and Jenkins Bakery or whatever, and it was just kind of like this whole taking the total number of Jenkins bakeries in the town to like 5. And I showed you that, didn't I? I said there's one here, you walk like 2 seconds, there's another one there.
Yeah. Your town is not it's not real representative of true small town Britain. I mean it is in some ways.
It's a weird like
it's on
Welsh.
It's on the coast.
It's on the coast.
There's coastal paths. Like they're really trying to revive it, and I think it's kind of growing.
It's being revived, but it's not great. It's not great. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, town's gone to buggery now."
I was just gonna say, because like we've had in my town, we had the 2-screen movie theater. We had a skating rink, like roller skating rink, not ice skating.
Yeah.
A few parks that were nothing really special.
Yeah.
And a bowling alley, and that was about it.
We had a pool hall, a snooker place. You played billiards, pool.
Yeah.
We had the swimming pool.
Oh yeah.
We had a leisure center.
Yeah, we called it an activity center.
Yeah, and we had numerous parks and stuff like that. To go hang out in and stuff. And we had chip shops and kebab shops.
Yeah.
And we had this flea pit ridden entertainment center, which was also doubled as a theater. But we always used to go to see it, the cinema,
Mm. And is there?
And it was like it was like something out of the 1970s. It was. I mean, it was built in like the 1930s, but it was all like hadn't been updated since the 70s. Even the like feature production, it was very retro, doodle 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 doodle, and it wasn't like ironically so like, oh yeah, this is cool retro.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, this is what they were showing in like the 1970s and 80s.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to cut myself off. There's a bunch more that we could actually talk about, but we're well over time, so I guess we'll end it there. Let us know if you want to hear us babble on some more about this.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting. We might do a part 2 of it. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a lot more that we could talk about.
Scope
as far as jobs and drugs. Drug problems, yeah.
Drug problems. Yeah.
There's quite a few more things we could talk about. So let us know if you want us to do a part 2 at some point. Other than that, we appreciate you tuning in as always. Thank you so much for your support. Be sure to follow us on social media. We are at TButty, TEABUTTY on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yep.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.